Hello and welcome to the channel. Today we have a HDA that I'm going to be doing a little breakdown of. I've got a scene set up to show you how I'm going to use it, and then I'll run through some of the functionality and some of the ideas behind it and how you could use it yourself. At the end of the video, there'll be a link to the HIP file and also the HDA for you guys to download, have a look at how I've done it, a little bit of the code, and have a play around with yourself and use it yourself. So first of all, let me just explain what this HDA is about. So it's a camera ray mask. So the idea behind it is the camera will be shooting rays from the camera to the terrain and painting you a mask of what it sees through the camera. So as you can see through here. This is quite useful for when you have large scenes. Let's say you're scattering assets and you want to reduce what's outside of the camera or outside the frustum. You can also use this, and let's say you wanted to remesh this terrain so that it's lower geometry outside and higher res towards where the camera's facing. This is great for adding detail to just where the camera sees. So first, let me just explain this little scene, what I have set up here. So I've got a basic terrain inside of Houdini in one of the templates, and I have a camera move that is revolving around this mountain here. So the idea behind it is this will have a certain couple of attributes that you'll be able to use. I'll run through them now. So the first attribute you'll have is you'll be importing this camera. There'll be a resolution multiplier, which will be basically the Y and X coordinates of the camera, res. So for instance, this camera has 2048 by 1152. That will multiply by 0.1. So a smaller number means there'll be less rays fired out, a higher number means there'll be more. So less will be blotchier mask, quicker, higher, more refined mask, but slower. Camera depth here, so the length, that will be from the camera to the furthest point, almost like a clipping plane. So if you wanted stuff just in the foreground, you could reduce this, or you wanted to capture a whole scene, you could increase this. Caching, so this will cache from the start frame to the end frame of your sequence. So if I take this on here, you can see this will be the full camera moving around, and it will capture all of this that it sees in the frustum, and it will basically max on the attribute. So at the moment, this mask is writing to CD, so it's overwriting the color. You could, if you wanted to, write this to another attribute, for instance, mask. So if I middle mouse over this, you'll see that there's a mask attribute that's being written out of here. But for the time being, let's write it to CD. If you want to debug or you want to use the point cloud itself that it writes out, you can drop this down to points here. And as you can see, this is the point cloud that is fired out from the camera. And as it rotates, you can see the point cloud updating. So on the mask attribute, there's a couple of attributes here that you can use. So this is the point distance. So this is the influence from the points to the mask. So if you reduce this, you'll start seeing more of the actual particles themselves. But let's keep this on 40 for now. And then there's just a standard blur, which will soften it out a little bit. So how do we use this in a scene? So for instance, here on the left, you can see I have a couple of scatters, and I'm basically creating some masks and scattering a couple of assets onto the terrain. Here is a little proxy tree geometry that I've made. And as you can see from this point here, they're all over the terrain, so there's no refinement for this camera shot. But untick here, you can see now we are masking only where the frustum sees, and as you go around, it will recalculate and calculate your frustum. We're coming from 35,000 points to about 7,000, so you can see there's optimization, and there's no need sometimes for assets outside this frustum. But this is only a couple of assets here. If I introduce some more here, so I have a grass and a rock asset, you can see we go from 1 million to about a quarter of that, which is pretty good because when you start getting larger scenes, it starts becoming slow and harder to manage. So it's quite nice optimization. So right, I've got this set up in LOPS, so I'm going to dive into LOPS now, and I'll show you my setup. So let's turn this on Karma. And as you can see, we're now rendering 250,000 assets just inside the frustum. And if we zoom out, you can see how it calculates it only for where our mask is. If we move the frame, it will recalculate and scatter your assets there. So great, I hope you found this useful. There's a link in the description if you want to download it and have a play around with yourself. Let me know any feedback you have with it, if there's any functionality you'd like to see in it, or if you have any bugs at all, and I'll hopefully be able to address it and be able to do a newer version. Any donations towards the channel will be much appreciated. Hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you in the next video.